to this lightning talk on MetaSounds, which is a way harder topic than the sequencer. But today we're going to just look at two basic examples with the MetaSounds. First of all, it's your triggering of simple files like you would do. So most of you will remember before you had these sound cues in Unreal. If we open that up again, and if we wanted to trigger our Campfire loop here, we would just drag this up in here, trigger that, and that's basically it. But you do have other sound nodes that were very good to have compared to maybe like Unity, which didn't have anything for sound. I mean, just a mixer. But Unreal already had some functionalities, like you can combine some more sounds together. There's an interface for it, but as you can see, all those nodes, you can't automate anything. You can't create any logic. It will be inside the blueprints, and that changes with the MetaSounds. So if I create a new one, we're going to create one from scratch. And you arrive at this interface. It's already quite confusing. You have an input, two outputs. So this input, it can work like an event on if you remember the concept of events in WYs, because you can create a lot of inputs. So let's say I create another one, and I can drag this, and I can add any kind of functionality I want after this. And to be more, we can name it something else, play radio. And now if I call the MetaSounds inside a blueprint, I can reference play radio. So any logic inside that MetaSound that's attached to that will play. So let's say, but this was something else already. But let's say we want to play our Campfire that we had. So you would do a wave player. And you're going to see already how much stuff you can do right off the bat. You can see how much nodes you have, and you recognize the colors. You have floats, booleans, time. This the wave player with the audiophile kind of object, and with that you can do a lot of things. So first of all, we're gonna just set up our Campfire. Well, I would do this second screen, but here, so I have and this is not going to play anything because we need to hook up things first. You have to know that. So especially this output, it's where the sound is going to go. So pink means sound usually. So we're going to hook up that to our output, out mono, from our wave player, but we still don't have anything because on play on the MetaSound, it's not connected. So that is correct. And now we get our loop. We can also check loop, of course. And so it does what the other sound cues would do. But we also have this unfinished, and it says warning. It's because every MetaSounds needs to have a finish logic, because if you don't trigger the unfinished, you can maybe do a fade out and not trigger unfinished, and the MetaSound is going to play forever and it's never going to stop. It's going to use resources. So it's important to hook up a logic to stop your sound, even if you don't have one. So that's where it gets more complicated. You have to be careful of your output here. You have to be careful on when your sound finishes, and you can also trigger stuff from multiple places. So you can see there's a lot of stuff we can do. But the cool thing about it is that, so if I want to trigger a logic when I stop the sound, I can do that. Before it was all in Blueprint. So let's say I want to create a fade out of this sound. You know, when I press stop, it's going to go through like 3 seconds and stop it as over time. Yeah. So first of all, we need a value to automate. So we can get another mixer, and this one has a gain value, which I'm interested in. And this is the value I'm going to, because of course, another thing to remember is that the MetaSound, they're not designed like a sound designer or composer would think, like stuff called like fade in, stuff called like, I don't know, a loop manager. I don't know, many terms that we know, but as you can see, it's more programming oriented with mathematics, value setup. It's a programmer, I think, will do way better at MetaSounds that a sound designer composer. I mean, at first, because it's way more following that kind of logic. So now if I do want to do a fade out, here's how you can do it. So first of all, this value, we can promote it to a variable inside and we're going to call this our final gain, which is a float. Yes, final gain. And on this play, no, this play will not stop, will not change, but we can do a new input, a new trigger input, which is going to be when our loop stops. So loop stop. By the way, I can do the same with the actual trigger of it. When we start the sound, I can call that in. However, it doesn't need to be the start of the sound. The MetaSound can play, but it can start, but it doesn't have any sound because you're not triggering anything. So that would be the scenario here. When I drag this, I delete that one, and my loop starts is going to be the start of the event. So I played it, but there's nothing I need to trigger that specific input. And now we have it. So our loop stop also is going to create a fade out for us. So in order to do that, you need to first set that value we created. So we're going to set a float. And the output value is first of all, wait a second, I need to remember this. And we also need this node. It gets a bit complex. So that final gain is going to do an interpolate kind of function. This is going to run when you run the MetaSound. It doesn't need to be connected to anything. When you don't have any connection node, it means that it's going to run. So that's also something to think about, how things work synchronously or together. It's also quite complex. And so this final gain, I hold shift and I can get that final gain value. And actually that target is that value we're going to set to that interpolate function. There's no time built in inside that. It will be way easier to have a value of time here, but we have to do that. So we're going to promote this to graph variable. I mean, this one more, target, graph variable, call it target for now, and we're going to set it to the output value. I need to hold shift so that it creates a thing like this. And so on loop stop, wait a second. Getting some quick crackle, but I think it's fine. So now that we did all this, we need to hook up the target value in here. And now, with the interpolate time, let's say 3 seconds. So if we start our sound, it's not starting anything because my initial value should be 1 and my target value is 0. So that's good. Now if we hit this, as you can hear, it did do that fade out that I wanted. Okay, why this target value not? I know, but I set it up. You see, I got confused for a second. I don't need to do this. But as you can see, the sound didn't finish. So I did a fade out. It's cool, but the MetaSound keeps playing. So we need to set that function too. But if we do this, it's going to stop right away, which not what you want. So you would do a trigger delay. So you can see it gets quite complicated to do a simple fade out. It's definitely not something you're supposed to know when you. So here we have our delay time, which is 3, just like the interpolate time. I'm stopping this. And it did finish the sound as well after 3 seconds. And now we enter something very cool about MetaSounds, is that the promotion to variable or to inputs. So let's say that interpolate time, I want to automate it or just control it in a general manner. So I will promote it to graph input. So I can control that, but I also have this delay time that I can control with it. So now I can control the fade out of my loop. Maybe set this amount instead. And it's going to stop faster, etc. So this is the kind of stuff that you can do with that's definitely more complicated, but once I think I didn't learn all the stuff there is to it. There's so much, but once you learn how to do that, you can probably create nice systems with that. It evolves very nicely. Oh, I'm already on 14 minutes. I wanted also to show an also cool thing that we can do with MetaSounds. Going to do this very simple. We also have oscillators now, which is what they call generators. And you have sine, saw, square. Those are, the simple sine waves in synthesizers. Synthesizers are composed of oscillators, like a sine wave. You modulate a sine wave, and that you can modify it in order to create something. And that's basically what they give you with this tool. So if I take a sine, another quite interesting. This is gonna play already, which is kind of interesting because just it has this output audio, it still plays sound, even though nothing is triggering it. It's just enabled. So what if I want to create a one shot out of this? How would you do it? There's no module to create a one shot. Like just something that plays and stuff right away. You need to use, for example, an envelope. Is another term. An envelope means how the sounds evolves in the attack time, how it decays, how it stops, how it evolves in a small period of time. So you would use an envelope. That envelope would trigger our synthesizer, our output synthesizer. Sine, I can't pronounce, that's fine. And so now, of course, we don't have a input play. Let's try that again. And attack time to like 0.1 and decay time to like 0.3. So I'm sorry, this is on done. No, this is here on done, and I'm triggering here. I often get confused again. Okay, so I'm triggering my envelope, and it's stopping the sound, which sounds horrible for now. But let's set this down. Do you guys also get this annoying crackle? Yes, I'm sure you do. Wait a second.
The crackle started like about a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'll need to look up into that. Okay, but I'm almost finished. But with the crackle, it's not going to sound very good. But okay, let's do that anyway. Let me just Task Manager.
Sorry, it's just your mic. The sound from Unreal is not crackling. It's only your microphone.
Okay.
So we can hear the audio fine.
Okay. Restart. Okay, well, I'm going to build something else with this sign. So going back to everything can be automated or like control with time. So what you can do, maybe this frequency, we want to automate this frequency because right now it sounds very stupid, very, very simple. By the way, on play, I want to use that actually because that's the actual. Okay, now we're better. And let's say this frequency, I want to modulate it, and you can use, they added what we call LFOs, low frequency oscillator. It's what we use in audio to create something over a second. And this is so our frequency was 200, so we can do something like modulating between the maximum value. This is getting very deep into this, but this LFO is going to the frequency of 5 from 0 to 200. So if we remove this envelope, actually, on done, you're going to hear this. You can create that kind of a output inside of the MetaSounds already.
Whatever you did before, we are no longer hearing any of the audio inside of Unreal.
Oh.
So Alex mentioned something about your crackle, and then I think you changed something, and we lost the audio in Unreal.
Yeah, I get this sometime with the Unreal, which is, and I'm trying to actually. You can't hear this?
Nope.
Well, it's already 18 minutes. Maybe I should do a part 2 then.
Okay. Yeah, but go ahead and finish what you're talking about. Separate of not hearing the sound, so you just run that thought out.
So what was the thought again? Sorry.
You were talking about the LFO and
Yes.
to shape the sound itself. And I know we can't hear the sound, but you can. So if you just want to finish this thought really quick, and then we'll get into Q&A because I have a couple of questions.
Sure, yeah. So this LFO is going to control the frequency of my oscillator, but I can also control, you can do infinite amounts of control. If I want to, my maximum value was 220, but I can put that, sorry, in the minimum value actually, 220, and you can modulate the value of the max value of the other LFO, and you can't hear that, which is completely useless. I'll do a part 2 with all of that, but yeah, basically it opens the door to a lot more functionalities and a lot of stuff to cover. I think, yeah, it needs a part 2 for sure. Running over time.
Okay, great. Nice. I've written down, I have 5 questions. So I'll start with, at the beginning you showed that you can reference multiple inputs. And so am I correct in understanding that this works similar to functions or events that you might have with a blueprint? You can set up the different inputs and then call whichever one you want, call whichever input you'd like externally, or you can have logic inside of the MetaSound itself, which will then trigger from another input inside of it too.
Yes. Yeah, you got it correctly. It's
Okay.
you can trigger an input. I mean, you can create a trigger, sorry.
Yep.
And any logic that you want to put. Oh, this was incorrect one. This was another thing. Yes. Any input, you drag this out,
Yep.
and you can reference this inside a blueprint. So I showed the last time how I reference, can show
Yeah.
it very quickly. You guys remember?
Yeah, and my next question was going to be on the reference because seemingly it looks like on play, on finish that these are likely delegates that we can subscribe to. And so I was wondering in blueprints, if you reference the MetaSound, can you get a reference to the MetaSound here?
You can. This is my function library.
Yep.
Which is maybe not the best example, but you would just...
So why don't you right click?
You would drag and drop.
So actually, can you right click and just create new blueprint actor? Yeah, just in the content browser. We'll trash this, but just create a empty actor. Yeah, enter. Open it. Okay, so now add a variable. Or would it be a component? Which one?
It was, yes. Okay, so maybe you want to, this is what I did in my BP sound container. You can reference MetaSounds.
Okay.
And then...
Nice. Okay, can you drag one of those out?
I could access this one, yeah?
Yep, and then if you drag off of that, can you type in bind to... bind to... Okay, yep, there we go. Bind to event on audio finished. Yes, okay. So you can do that, right? Because if you go back to the MetaSound itself, we go to the right, we can see on the I think it was, output down there, you see on finished. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so then it looks like we can create multiple outputs, and that will automatically create a delegate for us that we can assign things to subscribe to externally. Okay, that's nice.
But this output, it's like kind of global. And if you have multiple things that can't finish, you would do a
so let's
trigger
try this really quick. Mm-hmm.
And anytime something's going to stop, it's going to run that trigger and stop the sound if like you have something.
So one of the things I'm interested about this, right, is part of the design around delegates is sort of a publisher subscriber model. And so the sound doesn't need to care about anything externally other than itself. It just has this delegate on finish, and it will just call this and broadcast, hey, I finished, and everything that cares about that can do its thing. So if you go to outputs and you create a new output for me under the source, and then, make it anything. You just make another float or whatever. Okay, now So could you click on Unfinished in the left details panel? Trigger.
You see that one is
type
kind of
is a
hard
trigger.
coded.
So if you go to output 1, and
This
if you
one's
change,
not audio output.
yeah, if you
It's
change
different.
the type to trigger.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. That's an output trigger.
So then if you go ahead and compile this and save it, and can you rename output 1 to MetaSound delegate? Just yeah,
delegate, yeah, call it just that, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so then let's go back to sound container and
Need
referencing,
to reference this.
yeah, reference that
Oh,
MetaSound. And so the thing I'm curious about is when we create new trigger outputs, does it automatically create the delegate that we can assign to? I'm assuming yes. But
I think so, yeah. Let me just quickly put an audio component. I will put, what's that object again? It's a sound, yeah. Media sound. That's not that. Audio component, yeah.
okay. Audio.
Oh yeah, that's this one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Confused for a
And
second.
attach. Yep. Okay, so we drag that out and then assign to delegate.
So you would do assign to, what you would do
Assign on.
on, yeah, audio finished.
No, because we're looking for delegate, right? Because we created a trigger that was named delegate. Okay, so it seems to not create
Well,
an event dispatcher, and they are preset.
mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Good
What
to
would be
know.
your, what is your example here?
Oh, well, if you
Maybe
go
I
back
can
in your
understand.
MetaSound source,
Yeah.
you know,
So what
because this
what
has
would you use?
logic. Yeah. So
Yes.
I mean, this on finish is quite broad. I was wondering if there's a
Okay.
case
Yeah.
where there's any. I mean, this is probably getting too much into the weeds. Is it seems that MetaSounds, you probably want to be more granular. And so the thought I had here is, let's say a sound starts, but in thinking about things more procedurally, perhaps there are influences happening real time in the game that cause the sound to morph or change. And we might then want to know that. But that gets back to the audio is not responsible for communicating any sort of state change. It is just doing its
Okay.
thing, which is audio. And then
Yeah,
to
I
what you're
see. I
saying
see what you
is
mean. Yeah.
any outside influence would just, trigger the, hey, it's time to finish or stop it or reset. Again, the audio should not
Yeah,
be
you
concerned
mean
with that outside
you
stuff.
mean this being a message to a blueprint so that we can
Yeah,
know
sort
when
of
it's stopped. You know?
driving state changes, but yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Well.
I agree with
Yeah.
you.
That's a
That's
great
not the
question.
case for us.
Maybe it's possible. Yeah. Right now, I
Uh,
was looking at just how you can trigger them. Trigger that
yeah.
you would do trigger, execute trigger parameter, and the names of our input, that will be those
Oh, okay. You can
input
do that
name.
too. Okay.
And but here this is the logic to
Yes.
trigger a MetaSound. Yeah.
Okay. And then another question to make sure I understood it right. You mentioned that nodes, when you add a node, even if it has no connections, it will still run asynchronously, which is unlike standard
Yes.
blueprints, which always require some sort of execution path. So in MetaSounds, you don't need an execution path necessarily. You can add things that will influence the audio and it'll run on its own, right?
Yes. Like
Okay.
this interpolate node, it does run. So this is why it gets quite confusing. Yeah. Because it's you have to consider
Well,
that.
yeah, it's good to know because sometimes blueprints can be a junkyards of things we've disconnected, but
Yeah.
not safe to do in MetaSounds. Okay, and then my last question is, I'm curious, can we set the variables externally from an outside actor? So you had delay time. If you add delay time as or we have final game. So from the sound container, Is there an option to? Okay, I'm wondering if it's just public by default because it has no public-private exposure here. So if you go to Sound Container, can you drag off of the new MetaSound source and type in set final? No.
I don't think it
Okay.
has that reference, which is a good thing. I want you to
Yeah.
dig into this here to expose values outside of the MetaSounds. So I
Yeah.
haven't looked into that
Because
yet,
I thought
but
of
it's a great
because what I'm thinking
question
about
too.
is if you have, the example that came to mind is, let's say you're playing a fire sound, right? But let's say that I have used an item that has now turned my normal blade into a fire blade, and I now have this fire applied to my weapon. Well, the sound it will make, it might still be the same fire sound, but it will change if I do a light attack versus a heavy attack versus a power attack. And I might even change it based on like direction, like it's left to right, right to left, up to top to bottom. And so my thought is I could see plenty of cases where when you call the MetaSound to play, you may want to pass in additional contextual information that might influence how the MetaSound plays its sound again. And the reason that came to mind is since there is so much logic, and I have seen a lot of procedural music generation in here, I'm generally curious as to how much influence we can exert on it from the outside.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
great question that I want to dig into. Yeah, to see if you can expose any of this
Yeah.
and to pass it into the function, which is the second part of my
Mm-hmm.
blueprint function library. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Kind of in continuation of this question, I also wanted to ask, and again, maybe this is all kind of like part of this previous question that Chris just asked. For example, in animation, what we can do, we can set up animation notifiers and then reference them in blueprints. What it allows us to do is, for example, if I play equipping animation, say equipping a sword from or a gun from a holster, right? I need to be able to attach the gun to a character's hand, specific bone. And what I can do in animation clip is set up like a specific trigger on basically on a time scale when that happens. And my question is, can this be done also here? For example, if a track plays, something is done here and it plays, and there is a certain beat or a certain specific time of that track, and I want to activate something based on that, is it possible to do? I hope it makes sense what I said.
Yeah.
I
So
think
it
it's
does make
kind of
sense
the
to
same,
me.
no?
Yeah. So I would say, Crow, your question is near identical to what I was mentioning, just a different
Oh,
application.
I think yes, yeah.
Yeah, because
This
with
was
the anim
passing a value to a
notifiers,
MetaSound.
yeah, it's I add a reference to the MetaSound, and then I want to control with that singular MetaSound certain parameters and yeah, values, start time, etc. Yeah, principally the same thing. In can I reference the same MetaSound but modify some of the inputs that influence the output without having a bunch of different MetaSounds for each permutation of that,
Yeah,
which is a TBD at the moment. Yep.
make sure to look into that.
Cool. All right, good question. Anyone else? Okay.
I think it's good.
I guess we've covered all the complex questions now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Samy. That was awesome. Okay.